Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking on some of the most complex and I think politically charged source material we've ever faced.
It's definitely up there.
We're looking at three specific verses of the Quran Surah, 2.191, 8.1, and 9.5. And, these are the ones you frequently hear cited in global discussions about conflict, about warfare, and extremism.
It's a huge undertaking, and this one came from a listener who provided these verses and asked for really just one thing: objective clarity.
Right. Just lay it all out.
Exactly. What is the precise context of their revelation? How did classical scholars, during the Age of Empire interpret them, and how do modern scholars read them today?
And crucially, what do the critics say? What are the valid concerns about the text itself?
That's the mission.
So our goal here is to provide that rigorous, objective analysis of the source material. We're guides, not advocates. But I think the foundational challenge, the thing we have to say right up front, is that isolating these verses is the biggest mistake you can make.
It leads directly to misunderstanding.
When you hear phrases like, kill them wherever you find them, or strike upon the necks, completely out of context, of course, it's shocking.
That is the single most important rule when you approach any sacred text dealing with conflict. Context is everything. To get to the true purpose, we have to use the historical contextual lens, or what's known as asbab al-nuzul.
The occasions of revelation.
Exactly. These were not abstract ideas dropped from the sky. They were specific responses to specific, often existential conflicts in 7th century Arabia.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this verse by verse. Let's start with 2.191 from Al-Baqarah. This one is often described as sort of the foundational verse for justified conflict.
Indeed. The verse says, "And kill them wherever you overtake them, and expel them from wherever they have expelled you." And then it adds, "And fitna is worse than killing."
Okay, that last part, fitna, seems key.
It's everything. The context here is persecution. This was revealed after the early Muslim community had endured 13 years of intense persecution, torture, economic boycott.
13.
A long time. And it ended with them being expelled from their homes in Mecca. They were refugees in Medina when this was revealed.
So this command to fight is immediately tied to their own suffering.
Exactly. The purpose was to provide a specific military command for defensive warfare against an enemy that had already started the hostilities. And let's just pause on that word fitna.
Please.
In this context, it's not just, discord or trouble. It means systemic oppression, religious coercion, civil strife that is so severe it threatens the very existence of the community. So the verse is arguing that allowing that kind of relentless oppression to continue is morally worse than killing.
That completely reframes the stakes. But even with that severity, there's a necessary legal limiter here, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely essential. You cannot read verse 191 without reading the one right before it, 2.190.
And that says,
"Fight in the way of God those who fight you, but do not transgress. Indeed, God does not like transgressors."
do not transgress.
That qualifier sets the principle of restraint, of proportionality right at the outset. It establishes that the rules of war are binding even on the side that's been persecuted.
That brings a lot of clarity. Okay, let's move to the second one, 8.12 from Al-Anfal. This one has some very intense graphic battlefield language that critics often point to.
And this is a perfect example of why asbab al-nuzul is so important. Verse 8.2 is not a general command for all time. It is explicitly about one single event, the Battle of Badr in 624 CE.
Right, their first major battle.
The first critical existential battle. The small Muslim community was vastly outnumbered, outgunned by the powerful Quraysh army from Mecca. It was a do-or-die moment.
And the text seems to describe God directly intervening to help them.
Yes. It's presented as this narrative of divine support. God is inspiring the angels and believers, telling them to strike upon the necks and strike from them every fingertip.
Which sounds brutal.
It does, but think of it as a tactical instruction in the heat of a crisis. It's meant to boost morale, to instill terror in a much stronger invading force. The key is that it's a specific instruction for a singular moment of survival. You can't just abstract that into a universal rule for warfare centuries later.
It's a snapshot of a battle for survival, not a blueprint for foreign policy. Okay, now for the third one, and this is maybe the most challenging of all, 9.5, known as the verse of the sword.
This is the one that really requires the deep dive into the geopolitics of the time. Critics will frequently cite this verse, and only this verse, as the ultimate proof of aggression.
It says, "But when the sacred months have passed, then kill the polytheists wherever you find them." And if you just stop right there, the argument seems pretty powerful.
It does. But the crucial questions are, who are these specific polytheists and why are they being targeted?
It's not just anyone who isn't a Muslim.
Not even close. The context is very late in the Prophet's life, around 631 CE. This is a declaration of annulment of treaties with specific, identifiable polytheist Arab tribes. Tribes who had repeatedly, systematically violated their pacts.
So it's about treason. In 7th century Arabia, a treaty was your life insurance, basically. Breaking it was an act of war.
It was an act of open war. The source material is clear that this was a response to chronic, severe treachery. It wasn't unprovoked. And even then, it wasn't immediate. Verse 9.5 was an ultimatum that came after a 4-month grace period.
The sacred months.
That's right, 4 months where these treacherous tribes were given a chance to stop the hostilities and go back to keeping the peace. It was a formal declaration of war against hostile states, not against individuals.
But the truly crucial element, the one that gets left out of 99% of these discussions, is the very next verse.
Verse 9.6. And it completely changes the reading of 9.5.
No.
It says that if any of those polytheists, even from the tribes at war, seeks asylum,
What happened?
you must grant him protection until he has heard the words of God, then deliver him to his place of safety.
So the command flips from warfare to protection and safe passage the moment an individual asks for it.
It's a massive, massive qualification. It shows the war was against the hostile political entity, against their treason, not against an individual's personal belief.
Okay, that sets the historical stage, but now we have to get into the theological challenge that came later.
Yeah.
How did classical scholars, writing when the Islamic Empire was expanding, square these very specific war verses with the Quran's other messages about peace, like no compulsion in religion?
And this is where a major intellectual split happens. It all revolves around a concept called abrogation, or nash. Jurists like Al-Tabari and Ibn Kathir, they were building a comprehensive legal framework, a sharia, for a functioning empire. They had to reconcile these early, tolerant Meccan verses with the later, more forceful Medinan verses.
And their solution was naskh, basically arguing that a later verse can supersede or cancel an earlier one.
Precisely. So the more, let's say, hawkish legal view among some of these medieval scholars was that a verse like 9.5 abrogated the earlier peaceful ones. Their goal wasn't just to promote aggression, it was to create a coherent legal standard for how the state should act.
But that creates a huge theological problem, doesn't it? If the text is the eternal word of God, how can one part cancel another?
It absolutely creates tension, and critics today point to that and say naskh is a concession that the earlier teachings just couldn't handle the realities of power.
But the proponents would say,
They'd argue it shows the Quran is a dynamic text, revealed in stages to move a society from, well, barbarism towards civilization, sometimes through necessary graduated laws.
and even these scholars, the ones who accepted naskh and saw 9.5 as a basis for expansion, even they put some radical limits on warfare.
This is a vital point that gets missed. They established incredibly strict rules of engagement that were revolutionary for the time. They strictly forbade killing non-combatants, women, children, the elderly, monks, farmers. They forbade destroying crops, poisoning wells, mutilating bodies.
So compared to the brutal, anything-goes tribal warfare of the time, the Jahiliyyah, this was a civilizing force.
Absolutely. It replaced unrestrained raiding, or gazo, with rules, religious rules.
Which brings us to the modern interpretation. It seems like the mainstream has moved away from that broad use of naskh.
That's right. The modern mainstream, think of institutions like Al-Azhar in Cairo and most leading contemporary scholars, they largely reject the idea that 9.5 just canceled all the peaceful verses.
So how do they reconcile them?
They argue that both sets of verses are still active, they just apply to different situations. Peaceful verses apply to peaceful neighbors. War verses apply only when you are attacked or when a treaty is treacherously broken.
So the default setting is coexistence.
Precisely. They insist that war, or jihad, is only for self-defense or to stop severe oppression. And they lean heavily on verses like 60.8. God does not forbid you from dealing kindly and justly with those who do not fight you. That's the reigning consensus today.
Okay, before we get to the modern criticisms, let's look at the neighborhood. Was this idea of divinely sanctioned, sometimes harsh warfare unique to Islam back then?
Not even remotely. It was the universal norm. If you look at the Hebrew Bible, for example, you have the concept of harem, which means utter destruction, where the Israelites are commanded to wipe out entire enemy cities during the conquest of Canaan. You see it in Deuteronomy and Joshua,
And what about the Christian tradition?
Well, the Christian tradition, despite starting with a message of pacifism, very quickly had to develop what we call just war theory.
Augustine Aquinas.
Exactly. They had to create a theological justification for when a Christian state could go to war. So the Quran's real innovation wasn't inventing religious conflict, it was introducing radical limitations on it.
That really contextualizes it. Okay, now let's turn to the critical view. What are the main concerns that non-Muslims and critics raise today?
The primary concern, and it's a valid one, centers on textual literalism. The worry is that because the Quran is considered the eternal literal word of God, a command like kill them wherever you find them can become a standing order for all time, completely divorced from its history.
And this is exactly the playbook for extremist groups like ISIS.
100%. Their entire ideology is built on stripping away the historical context, the asbab al-nuzul, and ignoring all the legal limitations like verse 9.6. They take the command and claim it's universal. The criticism is that the text itself, when decontextualized, provides the ammunition.
Another big concern I've heard is about the old political theology, the way the world was divided up.
Right, the classical concepts of Dar al-Islam, the land of peace, and Dar al-Harb, the land of war. Critics worry this creates a permanent binary, suggesting that anywhere Islamic law isn't supreme is somehow a legitimate target, or that it undermines the citizenship of Muslims in non-Muslim countries today.
Which really leads to the modern relevance question. Does the logic of the 7th century still work when measured against modern universal human rights?
That's the core ethical dilemma. Critics will ask whether ancient persecution, however bad, can justify that level of military response when measured against, say, the Geneva Conventions and modern international law.
It's a tough question. And that brings us to a really fascinating scientific angle. Is there any science that can help us understand the structure of these commands if we set the theology aside for a minute?
Yes, and the social sciences offer some powerful lenses here. From an anthropological perspective, these verses were revealed to a tribal, fragmented society. The regulations were a critical tool for state building.
How so?
By defining who the enemy was, the aggressors, the treaty breakers, and creating clear rules of engagement, you move a society from tribal chaos toward a cohesive political state with laws of war.
So the structure of the text itself helped them survive and organize.
Exactly, and this connects directly to evolutionary psychology and game theory. The high stakes of 7th century Arabia meant that defining a clear in-group and a clear out-group, a clear aggressor, solidified in-group cohesion. It's a concept called parochial altruism.
Loyalty inside the group, aggression toward external threats.
A proven strategy for maximizing a new society's survival rate.
And what about the harsh punishment for treaty breakers in Surah 9? How does that fit in?
That fits perfectly into game theory's model of altruistic punishment. A command to severely punish treachery, like the ultimatum in 9.5, follows a very sophisticated tit-for-tat strategy.
Cooperate if they cooperate, but punish defection hard.
And swiftly. In a high-stakes, low-trust environment, that is the most stable and evolutionarily successful strategy for enforcing cooperation. It builds trust by making betrayal incredibly costly.
That's a fascinating way to look at it, seeing sacred commands as a functional mechanism for creating social stability and political survival.
It lets you analyze the function of the text, regardless of your belief in its origin. It was a successful political document for its time.
Okay, let's bring this all together for our listener. They came to us seeking clarity. After all this, what are the key takeaways for navigating this information today?
I think there are three main ones. First, the definitive conclusion is that historical context is key. These verses are about specific existential conflicts. You can't just abstract them into universal commands for all time.
Okay, number one is context.
Second, the prophetic model provides the ethical framework. The Prophet Muhammad's overall conduct, granting amnesty, protecting minorities, establishing those rules for non-combatants, that provides the essential counterbalance to the temporary war verses.
And finally,
interpretation is dynamic. The vast majority of mainstream Muslims today reject the literalist, decontextualized readings that extremist groups use. They follow the consensus that these were context-bound military commands for specific historical aggressions, not a mandate for eternal violence.
That really clears things up, and it leaves us with a final, I think, profound thought for you to take away from this. Given that these sacred texts are considered eternal, the real challenge for modern societies is the ongoing process of ijtihad independent legal reasoning. How do nations rooted in religious tradition reconcile these ancient textual commands, revealed in a brutal tribal context, with the universal secular human rights standards of the 21st century? That continuous dialogue is where the future of this whole discussion really lies.